起来，不许往所奴了的软慢，把我们的血肉组成我们新的长城。中华民族到了最危险的时候，每个人被迫着发出最好的号声。起来，起来，起来！我们万众一心，冒着地上的炮火前进，冒着地上的炮火前进，前进，前进，进。
So welcome everyone for this week's edition of the Rising Tide Foundation Lecture. We've had the pleasure of listening to many presentations, and in this current movement, we have been following up on the theme of a dialogue of East and West to get to a better understanding of the principles that unite all mankind, East and West, especially at a time when there is just so much work being put into breaking up and schisming people's minds around Cold War lines of thinking of us versus them. And increasingly, a lot of the people who are, I guess, somewhat savvy to the existence of certain top-down manipulations that aim to profoundly change for the worse human civilization, there's been a susceptibility that I think all of us here have encountered and have been at a variety of ways frustrated with, which has led a lot of very good people to believe that ultimately the arch enemy of Western civilization and mankind is China. China is the heart of evil. And many good people have fallen for many of these psyops, these narratives that have just been spread all over the zeitgeist. There's a lot of fallacies, but it largely comes down to the susceptibility to, I think, falling for this comes down to not understanding the dynamics of universal history that brought us to where we are today. And by not understanding or appreciating some of those more subtle long-term dynamics there, people fall prey to this. So today, I am very happy that we're following up on last week's presentation that was delivered by Dr. David Wang, who introduced some wonderful insights into the forgotten part of American history, specifically the Chinese influence and inspiration of Confucian ideas on people like Benjamin Franklin and other founding fathers. And today, I think that the gestalt, the idea is going to take on new form in a very fun way with Quan, who has done an incredible amount of work on geopolitics and history and cultures. And it's just a pleasure to listen to Quan develop insights on all sorts of topics like this. And today he's going to carry forth this idea of the New Silk Road and where it comes from, what are the traditions that are being expressed, and how does a certain figure named Sun Yat-sen play into much of this, and why does this matter for today's world? So Quan, with that, I leave it to you.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you everyone to be present on my presentation today. So today the presentation will be on China, but on modern China statecraft from Sun Yat-sen to the Belt and Road Initiative. My presentation will be articulated around 7 names, 7 statements, and I will start with the actual president, President Xi Jinping, and I will finish with the actual president, President Xi Jinping. So those 7 men are President Xi Jinping, XI for his family name, President Hu Jintao, HU, Sun Wen, the founding father of the Republic of China in January 1st, 1912. Jiang Jieshi is better known in the West with his Cantonese name, which is Chiang Kai-shek. Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, those are the 7 men which will be the spine of my presentation, so to speak. So, as I said, I want to begin with President Xi Jinping. President Xi Jinping was born on June 15, 1953. So he's 68 years old today. And I want to talk about his concept, which is the concept of the modern Chinese development, or if you want, the development that is with Chinese characteristic for a new era, or better said, Chinese socialism, or socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. Okay, most of the time, many people in the West are asking themselves, what does China want? Okay, if I'm a reader of many Western think tank, and I would say that most of the question can be subsumed under the question, what does China want? And the main reason why I started with President Xi Jinping is because he answered to that question, what does China want, in 14 points. And those 14 points have been enshrined in the PRC, People's Republic of China Constitution, in March 11, 2018. And it's called Socialism with Chinese Characteristics for a New Era. So I want to take the time to enumerate all the 14 points, because if you only remember those 14 points, I would be extremely satisfied and I have done my job. So the first point of that program is ensuring the Chinese Party, the Communist Party of China, leadership over all forms of work in China. So the first and most important element is the leadership of the CPC, the Communist Party of China. Here I just want to mention a small thing. Most people have the tendency to say the CCP, okay, the Chinese Communist Party, but the right form is the CPC, the Communist Party of China. The second point is the CPC should take a people-centric approach to the public governance. So, one, leadership of the CPC. Two, the people is at the center. Three, the continuation of comprehensive deepening of reforms. Four, adopting new science-based ideas for innovative, coordinated, green, open, shared development. Five, following socialism with Chinese characteristic, with the people as the masters of the country. So that the point 5 is a reinforcement of point 2. Point 6, governing China with rule of law. Point 7, to practice socialist core values, including Marxism, communism, and socialism with Chinese characteristic. Here, I would like to make a comment on communist China. Often in the West, the expression communist China is meant to create an image of an evil nation or an evil state, evil government. You would be very surprised that in the mind of the Chinese elite ruling class and intelligentsia, communist or communism is the end stage of a long development, meaning that a communist state is an ideal state where there would be brotherly love between the citizens of that state. And the Chinese elite doesn't have the pretension to have a communist state in present day. Okay, so that's they call their regime as socialism with Chinese characteristic, because the communism or the communist state is only a far away ideal, not yet achieved. So I go on with the 8th point. Improving people's livelihood and well-being is the primary goal of development. So point 2, point 5, point 8 reinforce each other. Point 9, to coexist well with nature, energy conservation, and environmental protection policies, and contribute to global ecology safety or ecological safety. Point 9, to strengthen the national security of China. Point That's point 10, sorry. Point 11, the CPC is the absolute leader of the People's Liberation Army. Point 12, the policies of one country, two systems concerning Hong Kong, Macau, and eventually reunification or national reunification with Taiwan. Point 13, so for those who have any doubt about the intention of mainland China to take back Taiwan, point 12 stated very clearly that Taiwan will be taken back one day. Point 13, and that is a very important point, China will create a peaceful international environment in order to be in friendly relation with all the people of the world. Point 14, improve the Communist Party of China discipline, because the Communist Party of China is the tool to strengthen the Chinese nation in order to have the power to offer to the world a safe, peaceful environment with win-win collaboration and mutual friendly work together for mutual prosperity and share common destiny. And the last point, the 14th point, last but not least, of course, because the discipline inside the CPC and its capability to perform, of course, is at the core of the capabilities of the Chinese nation inside China and outside China. You probably notice that in the coat of arms of the Chinese, of the PRC, the People's Republic of China, you have a big star at the top and 4 smaller stars around that big star. The big star symbolized the CPC, the Communist Party of China. The 4 smaller stars symbolize the 4 groups of Chinese people, meaning the workers and the peasants, the intellectual or the intelligentsia, the industrialist, and the soldiers. So those 4 groups of Chinese people that and those 4 groups exist in every nations of the world, but in the case of China, it's the Communist Party of China that is the coordinating factor for the common good and for working together. And I said that if you only remember those 14 points, I would be very happy, because it's truly the core of modern Chinese statecraft, as it has been enshrined in the People's Republic of China Constitution 3 years ago. And it's called the Xi Jinping Thoughts on Socialisms with Chinese Characteristics for a New Era. And what does he mean by for a new era? A new era meaning an era that will be mostly defined by international cooperation, open paradigm, and the downgrading of oligarchical system. The other major framework, ideological framework or intellectual framework or philosophical framework for the Chinese state is what President Hu Jintao, who was the paramount leader for China between 2002 and 2012, offered, also enshrined in the Chinese constitution, and is called a concept for scientific development. What does he mean by a concept for scientific development? I will read the general statement, okay? Humanism is at the center of the scientific development concept. The people-oriented concept is to take the interest of the people as the starting point and end point of all work to continuously meet people's multifaceted needs and promote the overall development of the people. And here I would like to make a link with the ancient Chinese philosophy. The first word of what I just read is humanism. Chinese humanism use the same concept than truth, goodness, and beauty as we can see in Plato's philosophy. And I think that you all know that symbol. Well, truth, you have to imagine truth as the emptiness, okay? Because truth is something foundational. It cannot be seen, okay? It's non-manifest. So imagine utter vacuity as the symbol of truth. After that, you have goodness, which is symbolized by the circle. And after you have beauty, okay? Truth, goodness, beauty. And those are the three fundamental philosophical tenets of Chinese philosophy for the reality of the universe and for the reality of political constructions. But it has also a consequence. In Asia, in China in general, those societies are understood as very hierarchical societies. That hierarchy is rooted in natural laws. And that natural law started with truth, goodness, and beauty. And I would use, since I'm speaking to Westerners, I would use Plato vocabulary to make you understand, okay? What is true in the universe is also true in the universe of human organization. So truth corresponds to the philosopher king. Goodness corresponds to the aristocrats, or if I might remember you, the aristocrats are people having the level of awareness that would push them to develop knowledge and creativity. So an aristocrat in Chinese philosophical thinking or political thinking is a ruler motivated by the development of knowledge and creativity. And beauty corresponds to the timocrats. And I would like to remind you that a timocrat is a ruler motivated by honor. And of course, under that, you have the plutocrats, who are rulers motivated by profits. I don't want to go further because last time I developed in details what I mean from the philosopher king to the ochlocrats, meaning mob rule. So in an hexagram, the top three lines represent the philosopher king, the aristocrat, the timocrats. And the three lower lines in an hexagram having 6 lines, you have the plutocrats, the timocrats, the stage, the lowest timocrat, meaning the timocrat believing that justice is only a convention, because the true timocrat, justice for him is honor. So the 3 lower lines are lower timocrat, the plutocrat, and the democrat. The ochlocrats being simply the mob rule, meaning there is no order at all, is not even considered in the hexagram representation. Okay, so after that parenthesis of ancient philosophy, I would like to come back to President Hu Jintao, a concept of scientific development. I read the general statement, but now I would like to keep on with the details. That concept for scientific development in the first point is economic development. And economic development means improvement of the material living, but also the cultural living standards and the health standards. Okay, if you don't have a healthy body, you cannot have a good economy, obviously. The second point is human rights of the citizen, and it includes political rights, economic rights, and cultural rights. The third point is about personal development, and that's very interesting because I was speaking of the hexagram reflecting the journey of awareness and of the development of the mind. That mentality coming from ancient China is enshrined in the contemporary political Chinese statecraft. And what is personal development is the people's ideological and moral quality. It's also the people's scientific and cultural quality. And finally, the people's health quality. And health here is not only physical health, but also psychological, mental health, obviously. And finally, the fourth point, to create a social environment where people develop equally and give full play to their intelligence. Okay, I'm not saying that the Chinese government succeeded in creating an aristocratic government. To be true, I consider them democratic. Okay, they better than plutocrats in my understanding. They are democrats. They rule for the honor of China, of the honor of the Chinese people, and the honor of the Chinese civilization. I think there are some aristocrats among them, but I don't think they all aristocrats. Okay, but this last sentence, at least on the ideal dimension, they want to be aristocratic. They want to give full play to the intelligence of the Chinese people. And I remind you that aristocrats are rulers motivated by the development of knowledge and creativity. And from here, I would like to make a jump 100 years back to Sun Wan. Sun Wan is better known as Sun Yat-sen, which is the Cantonese form of his name. So I will keep on to say Sun Yat-sen from now because he's well known in the West by his Cantonese name. So Sun Yat-sen was born in 1866 and he died on March 25, 1925. Sun Wan is the father of the founding father of the Chinese Republic. And I want to start with something very practical. What is known in the West as a Mao Suit in China, either mainland Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, or for the overseas Chinese, the Mao Suit is called Zhongshan Fu, and it means the jacket of Mr. Zhongshan. Zhongshan is the courtesy name of Sun Yat-sen. Okay, so it was with the direction or the description of Sun Yat-sen that a tailor named Tian created what is called in the West the Mao Suit. And why do I want to talk about a piece of garment here when I want to talk about statecraft? Because that jacket is the symbol of modern Chinese statecraft. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 1. The back of the jacket, it's in one piece. Okay, because some style of jacket you will have a separation at the bottom. Okay, but if you look at the Mao Suit, the back is only in one piece, and that one piece symbolizes the Chinese unity and peace inside China. 2, the collar of the Mao Suit have 2 flaps, and those 2 flaps is a very strict style, and that strict style represents the good governance of China. You have 3 buttons at the cuff, okay? And those 3 buttons represent 1, Minzu, 主义, 民族主义 means national sovereignty. 2. 民权主义, it means the rights of the people or the power of the people, better translated, the power of the people. And third, 民生主义, meaning the livelihood of the people or the welfare of the people, okay? Those are the three principles of the people by Sun Yat-sen. And for the last century, the ideal of all Chinese government has been dictated by those three principles. I don't mean that they all succeeded to achieve those principles, but on the theoretical basis, those are the three tenets which guide all Chinese government. The four pockets, okay? So this pocket is Yi, justice. This pocket is Li Yi, meaning rituals, but it's not only ritual, it's not mindless rituals, but understanding of deep metaphysical principle, truth, goodness, beauty. This pocket is for integrity or honor. It's better translated as honor. And this pocket is for honesty. Okay, so 4 major virtues for governance. And finally, the 5 front buttons represent the 5 divisions of government. The first one is the administration. The second one is the legislation. The third one is the judiciary system. The fourth one is the examination system. And finally, the 5th one is the supervision system. So, Sun Yat-sen contributed on the theoretical level to the Chinese government, but also on the practical level. So I wanted to use the Mao Suit or the Zhongshan Fu, the jacket from Mr. Zhongshan, as a basis to present the principles. Now, I want to name some practical realization from Sun Yat-sen. He started the 1911 revolutions because there are 2 Chinese revolutions, the 1911 and the 1949. Those 2 revolutions are one organic one, but in 2 phases, if you want. The first Guangzhou uprising happened in 1895. It fell. The second uprising, not in Guangzhou, but in Huzhou in 1900, also fell. And when the 1911 revolution succeeded, Sun Yat-sen was not in China. He was in the United States, but his sidekicks informed him, and he came back to China for December 1911 to be named the first president of the Chinese Republic on January 1st, 1912. What is amusing is that the last imperial dynasty, the Qing dynasty, was still ruling when Sun Yat-sen was promoted to be the president of China. And the last Empress Dowager, the Empress Dowager Long Yu, signed the Abdication Act of the Qing dynasty a month later on February 12, 1912, ending thus 21 centuries of imperial rule in China. There are many things that I can talk about Sun Yat-sen in terms of his practical accomplishment, but I don't want to go too much in the details because you can have those details by going by looking on Wikipedia, for example. I want to give a tribute to his brother, Sun Wei, because his brother owned a ranch in Hawaii, and that range was almost 50 square kilometers, or 12,000 acres if you want. And his brother Sun Wei sold the most of that range in order to finance Sun Yat-sen revolutionary achievement. So I wanted to name his brother, which is not very often named in his revolutionary endeavor. The other thing I want to name for Sun Yat-sen, that he took a very major decision in 1923. It was January 26, 1923. He met with the Bolshevik diplomat Adolphe Joffre, and they signed what is called in history the Sun Joffre Memorandum, or the better said, the Sun Joffre Manifesto. It was at that time that Sun Yat-sen, which was the leader of the Kuomintang, accepted the communists because it was the condition from Moscow in order to give aid and advices to the newly founded Kuomintang. And it has a very practical result, which is the foundation of the Whampoa Military Academy on an island of Guangzhou, which is better known in English as Canton City. And that Whampoa Military Academy will create the most of the nationalist officers, either on the Kuomintang side or the communist side. For example, the first director general of the Kuomintang was Jiang Jieshi, better known by his Cantonese name of Chiang Kai-shek. And the political commissar of that Whampoa Military Academy was Zhou Enlai, the Prime Minister of China under Mao Zedong. So at the beginning, there was a deep interconnectedness between the nationalist faction and the communist faction. And it's not a surprise that Sun Yat-sen is the only Chinese statesman that is equally admired on both sides of the Taiwan Straits. And I want to finish my short presentation of Sun Yat-sen by reading an excerpt of his speech on the inauguration day of the Whampoa Military Academy. Whampoa is written W-H-A-M-P-O-A. The true Chinese name is Huangpu, but in English and in French, it's better known as the Whampoa Academy, and is on an island offshore of Canton City. So on the inauguration day, on June 16, 1924, Sun Yat-sen made a memorable speech, and I will only read some lines to you. Now I start. Our aim shall be to found a free land, warn peace, and be on our stand. Lead on, comrades, vanguards you are. Hold fast your aim. Be sun, be star. Be earnest, be brave. Your country to save, one heart, one soul, one mind, one goal. And it's still the heritage of the Communist Party of China. That speech has been made on June 16, 1924. So it has been made almost a century ago, and it's still valid. And let's not forget that the Communist Party of China just celebrated last month its 100-year anniversary also. And we have here the 87th anniversary of that famous speech. Lead on, comrades, vanguards you are, hold fast you aim, be sun, be star, be earnest and brave, your country to save. and it's still valid. From now, I would like to go to President Mao Zedong, because of course, without Mao Zedong, there would not be the new China, of course. Mao Zedong was born on December 26, 1893, and died on September 9, 1976. He was most important for China because he understood the new century, but at the same time, he understood the Chinese characteristics. He understood deeply that China cannot be liberated by the standard Marxism. Because in Marxism, the people are mostly industrial workers. But in China, there were not many industrial workers at the beginning of the 20th century. So he had to galvanize, to wake up, to stimulate, to give enthusiasm to the mass of Chinese peasants in order for China to liberate herself. And I think that it was the essential contribution of Mao Zedong himself, the son of a peasant, obviously. Some biographical steps. So he was born in 1893. He stayed with his families till his university days. He decided to be a teacher. So he went to the Hunan Normal School, and he graduated in 1921. And he, sorry, I make a mistake. He graduated in 1919 at 26 years old. And he was the third of his promotion. And he was very active in the philosophical, political, literary circles of the Hunan capital of the time, Changsha, which is the name of the Hunan capital. One of his teachers, well, the main person influencing his life, and also his father-in-law, Professor Yang Changji, Yang, Y-A-N-G, born 1871 and died 1928. He was a major Chinese philosopher of his time, and he recognized Mao as someone outstanding. And here we have a very typical Chinese history, if I may say so. A member of the gentry recognized a peasant of exceptional talent and of outstanding charisma, okay? Like 2000 years before, the same happened to Liu Bang, the founder of the 400 years Han Dynasty. 7 centuries before, the same happened to Zhu Yuanzhang, the peasant founder of the Ming Dynasty. So for a reader of Chinese history, the meeting between Professor Yang and Mao Zedong was something called a predestined meeting, because Professor Yang, a member of the gentry, gave Mao Zedong the education and the refinement that he lacked. He even sponsored him in the complicated social life in Beijing, and he even introduced him to Cheng Tu-Xiu, one of the 2 founders of the Communist Party of China. May I remind you that the first Congress of the Communist Party of China happened in July 23 and ended in July 30th, 1921. The official date in China nowadays to celebrate the anniversary of the Communist Party of China is July 1st. But to be exact, it has been founded between July 23 and July 30th, 1921. So Mao was one of the 13 delegates present during that week. And the two founders, Cheng Tu-xiu, Cheng, C-H-A-N, and Li Da-jiao, Li, L-I, were not present. And of the 13 delegates present at the first Congress, only 2 survive in 1949, which is the year of the founding of the People's Republic of China. In 1921, there were about 50 people who were members of the Communist Party of China. And on July 1st, 2021, at the 100th anniversary of the CPC, there were 95,148,000 members. I would like to remind you that the population of Germany is about 80 million. The population of France is about 68 million. And the population of the UK is about 65 million. And the Communist Party of China has 95,148,000 members. And you have to understand that those 95 million people have connection within their family, their friends, and their colleagues, okay? Meaning that the Communist Party of China represent probably 5 to 6 times that numbers, meaning that the Communist Party of China is going deep into Chinese society, because we can estimate that between 600 and 700 million people have a direct connection to the Communist Party of China, meaning half of China population, which is 1,400 million people, as you know. So I would like to say now, because I don't want to forget it, there's an excellent presentation by Eric Lee, which is a capitalist venturer and political scientist from mainland China. It's called A Tales of Two Systems. It lasts about 20 minutes or 25 minutes, and I think it's the most synthetic video on what is the Communist Party of China, and it explains in a few words the meritocratic system of China. I would like also to mention the series of short videos in 3 to 10 minutes by Professor Zhang Weiwei. Zhang, Z-H-A-N-G, Weiwei, W-E-I, from Fudan University in Shanghai. And that series is called The Chinese Way. And it's another excellent set of videos explaining clearly what is the Communist Party of China. What I would like to mention about Mao Zedong is that in 1927, he tried to conquer the city of Changsha, but he failed to do so. And August 1st, 1927 is the date of foundation of the People's Liberation Army in relation to that incident called the Autumn Harvest Uprising. After his failure in 1927, he would go east in the province called Jiangxi. And between 1927 and 1934, he would be the leader of a Soviet government called the Jiangxi Soviet government, or to be precise, the Jinggangshan Mountain Soviet government. And for the people who don't know why 1934 is an important moment, well, be informed that 1934 or October 1934 is the beginning of the famous Long March. And about 10,000 people started from the Soviet in Jiangxi province in southeast China to trying to escape the nationalist government of Chiang Kai-shek and finishing in northwest province, Shanxi in the Yan'an base the next year in October 1935. And at the start, they were about 10,000. And at the finish line, they were somewhere between 6,000 or 8,000. So 90% of them died during that odyssey. And I would say that it's one of the defining moments of the Communist Party of China. And between 1935 to 1949, it would be the headquarters of the Communist Party of China in its struggle against the degenerate bourgeois government by Chiang Kai-shek and the war of resistance against fascism and the Japanese aggression, which is the Chinese name for the Second World War. And the war of resistance against fascism and Japanese aggression started in 1937. So 2 years before the European World War, and ended in 1945. And from 1945 to 1946, there was a short period of truce between the nationalists and the Chinese Communist Party. The Civil War restarted in 1946, ending with the victory of the Communist Party of China on January 1st, 1949, when the communist troops entered Beijing, and with the declaration of the People's Republic of China on Tiananmen Square on October 1st, 1949. I think that I would like to limit myself about Mao Zedong, those elements for now. I'm perfectly aware that I'm far from covering all what is important concerning Mao Zedong, but I want to leave time for question and interactions. Of course, after Mao Zedong, the outstanding person in the Chinese contemporary history is, of course, Deng Xiaoping. And Deng Xiaoping, of course, was born in 1904 and died in February 1997. And I would like to mention some important moments in those famous reforms. The reform started in December 1978. In March 1981, Deng gave the power to decide to the local people for the agriculture. And it's very important because from then on, people were stimulated to produce more because their profits would be according to their performance. At the end of 1983, the land still are collective property. However, you have family exploitation with rewards according to the performance. So if you work harder, you will have bigger reward. The industrial reform was essentially from 1980 to 2000. And there you have the famous special economic zones. And the first of all of them, of course, is Shenzhen or Shenzhen, but I won't pronounce Shenzhen so everyone would understand. Shenzhen was a fishing village in the beginning of the 80s, And now it's a metropolis with more than 10 million people and a hub of technology and transportation. What I want to mention too is that most people think that the major event opening the 20th century is 9/11, but I beg to differ. Okay, the major element opening the 20th century is not 9/11. It's 12/11, 2001. Okay, because on December 11, 2001, China has been admitted to the World Trade Organization. And I think that's the defining moment to open the 21st century and not 9/11. If I may say so, I prefer to see 9/11 as the closing event of the 20th century and 12/11 as being the opening event of the 21st century. And to keep on with reforms between 2001 and 2021, meaning now, it's more the investment phase. And I want to mention the plan Made in China 2025, which has been promoted in 2015. There's one president that is not very, that is a little bit in the shadows of Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping, who is President Jiang Zemin. President Jiang Zemin was the Secretary General of the Communist Party of China between 1989 to 2002. But he was under the shadows of Deng Xiaoping, who died in 1997. But he's very important for China too. And there's a guy called Lawrence Kuhn, Kuhn, who wrote a very interesting book on him. I also want to mention the book by Ezra Vogel, E-Z-R-A, Vogel, V-O-G-E-L, on Deng Xiaoping. So President Jiang was important because he accepted the people having capitals and the big industrialists in China to be welcome into the Communist Party of China. And I think it was an important step because for China to go from a backward agricultural country to an industrial and technological country, it was important to have a reconciliation with the capitalists and with the intellectuals, even if they have to understand that they are not above the people. And I would like to give the very recent example of Jack Ma. Jack Ma is a kind of Chinese plutocrat, okay? And I think that he fantasized to be part of the global plutocrats. And lately, the Democrats from Beijing sent him a very clear and stern message that he is accepted as a plutocrat inside the Chinese system, but that is a bit far-fetched from him to fantasize that he's above the government. So I think that it was a clear and swift message sent to Ma and to all the plutocrats in China, fantasizing to overstep the government in Beijing. And contrary to the spin doctors in the West, Jack Ma has not been sent to a concentration camp. He was simply relaxing in his mansion in Hangzhou for 3 months, and he enjoyed perfectly his life in his beautiful and magnificent mansion in Hangzhou. So for those who were worried about him, he's in perfect health and accepted again among the Chinese elite. speaking of the Chinese elite and of the Western elite, I think that some of you probably read the book by Graham Allison from Harvard University, and it's called China. It's called Is China? No. It's called Destined for War. It has been published in 2017, and the complete title is Destined for War: Can America and China Escape Thucydides' Trap? What is interesting in this book? Well, there are many interesting things in this book, but I want to read you two excerpts from this book, and I think that it's very true, because even if there are many spin doctors and prostitutes in the West, there are many gentlemen too in the West. And Graham Allison is one of these gentlemen, meaning an educated people working for world peace and not spinning the narrative for war. And I think that Graham Allison understands both the West and the East. And I would like to read what Graham Allison understands as Western value. Okay, quote, "The US is a missionary nation derived from the belief that the non-Western nations should submit to the Western values of democracy, free market, limited government, human rights, individualism, the rules of law, and should embody those values in their institutions." Okay, end of quote. Now, what Graham Allison says about Chinese values. Quote, "The value of authority, the subordination of individual rights and interests, the importance of consensus and avoidance of confrontation, saving face, and in general, the supremacy of the state over society and individual." Very interesting, because I think he's right. Okay, once again, truth, goodness, beauty. Okay, the philosopher king, the aristocrats, the democrats. Meaning that in the Chinese and East Asian society, there is a natural hierarchy that is acknowledged. And if you want to have the honor to rule, you have to demonstrate that you are on the way to be at least a democrat, if not an aristocrat or a philosopher king. It doesn't mean that the people who are deemed to be lower are oppressed, but they don't have the responsibilities of the democrats, the aristocrats, and the philosopher king, because they are not considered to have the mind development and the level of awareness that makes them worthy to rule. And the plutocrats are certainly not worthy to rule. They are worthy to participate to the society, obviously, but they are not worthy to rule. And Graham Allison, at page 140 of his book, created not a diagram, but some concepts, and make a comparison between the US and China. By the US, you can understand the West in general, of course. So let's say a comparison between the West and China on 9 items. Okay, so I read the items and I will give first the Western understanding, and second, the Chinese or Eastern Asian understanding. First, the self-perception of the US is to be the number one. The self-perception of China is to be the center of the universe. So quite pretentious on both sides. I like that very much, that Alison put that very clearly. So the hubris is not only on one side, the hubris is on both sides. Second, core value. On the US, the core values, of course, is freedom. On the Chinese side, the core value is harmony, or cosmos, or order. The view of government for the US, the government is a necessary evil. For the Chinese, is a necessary good. The form of government for the US is the democratic republic. And for the Chinese, is a responsive or responsible authoritarianism. The exemplar for the US, for the West, is to be missionary, and the exemplar for the Chinese is to be inimitable. The attitude toward foreigners for the West is to be inclusive, and for the Chinese is to be exclusive. On that point, I don't agree, but that's okay. That's what Graham Allison said, because the Chinese can be very inclusive toward foreigners if they are respectful of their culture. The time horizon for the US is now, and the time horizon for the Chinese is eternity. On this point also, I disagree, because the Anglo-American establishment is very capable to have plans over decades and centuries. So to say that the Anglo-American establishment is only capable to be in the now, it's not true, okay? It's the facade, but on the facade, the Anglo-American establishment is perfectly capable to plan for decades and for centuries, and same for the Chinese, obviously. On the item of change, in the West, it's invention, and for the Chinese, is restoration and evolution. And on that point, I disagree too, because I think that both for the West and for China, invention, restoration, and evolution are three appropriate descriptions. And in terms of foreign policy, for the West is international order, and for China is a hierarchy. And also I disagree on that fourth point and last point for Allison, because for the West, there's international order, but also a hierarchy in which the West is at the top. And for China, there is also the desire for international order. And in the past, for China at the top, or maybe now, China is more reasonable. China is willing to have a win-win cooperation, not necessarily with China at the top, but among the top 5, which is the case anyway, because China is part of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations Organization, the 5 being China, Russia, the US, France, and the UK, of course. And I wanted to talk about this because I think that it's truly interesting, even if it's not on China precisely, but it's on China and the West, which is very, very important, obviously. Now, I was speaking very much for the first hour about plenty of principles and of tenets of statecraft, but I absolutely want to take the next 10 to 15 minutes to talk about practical achievements from the Chinese government. In 1949, when Mao Zedong entered Beijing, the life expectancy of the Chinese people was 35 years old, okay? 35 in 1949. Now the life expectancy is 77. The life expectancy in the US, I think, is 78 or 79. and the life expectancy in Cuba is 80. So it's quite good, 77. The literacy rate when Mao Zedong entered Beijing in 1949 was something around 20%. The literacy rate in 2018 was almost 97% on the national average. Of course, it's mean 100% for the new generation and for the urban dwellers, of course. And I would like to remind all of you that the central notion of Chinese statecraft, either ancient times or contemporary times, is the mandate of heaven, Tianming. And the mandate of heaven is as long as the rulers are capable to perform, they are worthy to rule. And what is to perform? To perform means to give order, food, and education to the people. Order, food, education to the people. So that's why I gave the numbers for the life expectancy, meaning food and health care and education. That's the core of the mandate of heaven. And last number I want to mention, when Mao Zedong entered Beijing in 1949, the Chinese population was around 550 million. 6 years after his death in 1982, the Chinese people were at 1 billion, and now they are at 1.4 billion. Another thing that I want to mention before I forget, what is socialism with Chinese characteristic? Okay, if someone asks you what is socialism with Chinese characteristic, the long answer is to mention the 14 points by Xi Jinping. That's the long answer. But if you don't remember the long answer, just say 70% of properties are private in China, and 30% of the properties in China is state property. Okay, that's socialism with Chinese characteristics. The Chinese middle class, which is around 400 to 450 million people, most of them have their own house, and many of them have more than one houses. And I repeat, 70% of properties in China are private properties. That's socialism with Chinese characteristic. And I repeat a second time, communist China in the mind of the elite, of the Chinese elite, is a far away broaderly society that we don't have yet, and we need to work to achieve that broaderly society in the future. China is not communist, China is socialist with the goal of a communist society in the future. Now I want to mention some practical achievements. Okay, of course, you all know the name of the company Huawei, Xiaomi, Lenovo, Oppo, Vivo, Weixin, Sina Weibo, etc. But I also want to mention the moon landing on the hidden face in 2019, the fact that there is the second Chinese space station working now with 3 astronauts or 3 taikonauts, because the Chinese name for astronauts is taikonauts. They are in a mission starting in June, and they will come back to Earth in September this year. I want to mention the experiment advance advanced tokamak, which is the artificial sun for fusion energy by China. I also want to mention the Galaxy supercomputers. I also want to mention the Beidao satellite navigation system. And the last satellite has been sent in June or July, if I remember. Let me check because I want to give you the exact. Okay. Okay. The last one has been sent in 2020, and now it's fully operational, and it's the Chinese equivalent of the GPS for those who don't know what Beidao, which is the Chinese GPS. And I want to mention the Belt and Road Initiative, of course, starting 2013 with the Eurasian land bridge finished from Shanghai or Yiwu to Duisburg in Germany. The two south Eurasian land bridge, which is going to the ASEAN, ASEAN countries to the southeast, and the Pakistani-Chinese economic corridor to the southwest, and the central Eurasian land bridge that is now in work because the eastern side is in China, but the western side is in Syria, and the center of that central Eurasian land bridge, of course, is Afghanistan. And it's a coincidence, but today, August 15, 2021, is also the day that Kabul has fallen, as all of you know. That will be the center of the Central Eurasian land bridge. I would like to mention also that there are almost 38,000 kilometers of high-speed train in China now, with about 30,000 in construction. So at the end, in some years, there will be 70,000 kilometers of high-speed train in China, with already 38,000 in operation, 38,000 kilometers in operation now. Of course, you have the Asian Infrastructures Investment Bank open for business since January 2016. And the headquarters are in Beijing. You also have the New Development Banks, which is the official name of the BRICS Bank, open for business in 2014, and the headquarters are in Shanghai. You also have the Petro Yuan, who has been created in March 26, 2018, because let's not forget that you have the petrodollar for now, but the petrodollar has a rival since the last 3 years, March 26, 2018. And you also have the BRI funds. And I want to stop here for the different practical achievements, because we can talk on and on, but you can go on Wikipedia and go to the list of projects by the Belt and Road initiatives. And I'm quite sure that during the question period, I will have probably more time to elaborate on that. I just want to take 5 minutes to finish about another concept related to the mandate of heaven, Tianming, because I just received the white paper of the State Council Information Office of the People's Republic China that has been published in August 2021, so this month now. The State Council is the official name of the Chinese Prime Minister team, okay? So it's from the Chinese Prime Minister office. The two concepts that is related to Tianming, the mandate of heaven, is Xiao Kang, a moderate, prosperous society, and Ta Tong, which is the grand harmony or great harmony. When I said that the communist society is a far away, brotherly love society in the far future. It's Datong, okay, it's the great harmony. But Xiaokang, the moderately prosperous society, is what is aiming Chinese elite with the concept of the Chinese socialism, socialist Chinese characteristic for a new era. And I just want to read you the titles of 5 chapters of the white paper by the Chinese State Council related to the Xiaokang concept, right? Moderately prosperous society. So the first chapter is achieving moderate prosperity and advancing human rights. 2, ending extreme poverty and securing the right to an adequate standard of living. And the Chinese government announced, I think in the first part of this year, 2021, the end of extreme poverty in China. 3, boosting human rights with development and securing economic, social and cultural rights. 4, protecting civil and political rights with law and governance. And 5, promoting social equity and protecting the rights of special groups. With special groups, you understand the weak, but also the minorities in China. And speaking of minority, if you are not informed, please send me an email. I will send you the papers or the link to debunk the Western prostitute spinning about the genocide in Xinjiang, because there is no genocide in Xinjiang. And I want to name some people on YouTube that could be very interesting for you. Pascal Coppens, C-O-P-P-E-N-S, Cyrus Jansen, J-E-N-S-S-E-N, Nathan Rich, R-I-C-H, Daniel Dumbro, D-U-M-B-R-I-L-L, Daniel Bell, B-E-N-N, Jeff J. Brown of China Rising Radio Sinolan, Matthew Eret, of course, from Rising Tide Foundation, and Cynthia from Rising Tide Foundation too, of course, on YouTube. Professor Yang Xuetong, Vijay Prashad, P-R-A-S-H-A-D, which is an Indian intellectual having a deep understanding of international geopolitics, China and India. Martin Jake, Professor J is quite illustrious. Professor Kishore Mahbubani, M-A-B-H-U-B-A-N-I. Alexander Mercuris, the Oracle from London. Yanis Varoufakis, Godfrey Roberts. And I want to mention 2 books, one written by Jeff J. Brown, The Big Red Book on Chinese History, Culture, and Revolution. I think that there's one book to read to know about contemporary China. It's truly Jeff's book, The Big Red Book, and the book by his friend Godfrey Roberts, Why China Leads the World. And it's talent at the top, data at the middle, and democracy at the bottom. I'm sure that, okay, maybe Eric Lee, of course, I already mentioned. Professor Chang Weiwei, I already mentioned. And I want also to mention 3 economists. John Ross, a British economist having an experience of Chinese economy for the last 3 decades. And 2 American, Professor Michael Hudson and Professor Richard Wolff. I'm sure that there are many things I did not cover, but let's say that I won't finish my presentation for today.
Thank you so much, Quan, and thank you for including Cynthia and myself in that illustrious list that you accumulated. I would ask if you can, though I did share some of the things you referenced in the chat area, I would ask to send me personally a list of all of those names and great links you think that people should follow up on, and I'll put them in the description box to this class so people could do some work research on their own. So far, we've opened up for a few questions, and the first person to get their name in there was Pascal. So Pascal, it's all yours.
All right. Hey, thank you, Quan.
Thanks.
That was a breathtaking lecture, really. It went fast. I tried to take notes, but you were too fast for me.
Okay.
No, it's good. It's good. I had a question. Since you said that, you know, even though you were on a boat recently, you kept in touch with geopolitical affairs. You mentioned at the end also, you know, the in the Belt and Road initiatives, the southern route through Pakistan and you know, the Afghanistan and all this this region. Now American troops are getting out, and I saw Canadian troops are being reinforced in Afghanistan. How do you see the situation there? What is China going to do about it? Since the Taliban are taking Afghanistan over, which basically, you know, it seems like all this war was for nothing. What yeah, I'm just gonna keep it very general. You know, what do you think about the situation there? What's China gonna do about it?
Well, Pascal, thank you for your outstanding question, because I was expecting one question about this situation. You know that the Taliban has been welcome in Tianjin in some weeks ago. Okay, so the strategy of China is not to enter Afghanistan. The strategy of China is to have economic development and to end the opium or the heroin rat line of the CIA, as you know. That's the two main aims of China, which in ending the heroin rat line, so cutting the CIA funding resources. Two, trying to cooperate with the Taliban, which will probably be the next government, if not the next government, one major component of the next government, in order to maintain peace in Afghanistan and also in China, because China doesn't want the province of Xinjiang, or I should say the autonomous region of Xinjiang, to be full of terrorists, of course, which is the modus operandi of the empire to destabilize their opponents, let's say. I don't want to use the word enemies. And three, by economical development to bring peace and order to Central Asia, in collaboration, of course, with China iron border, Pakistan, and with China ally without the name, Russia, Iran, and hopefully India, which are the major neighbors around that corner of the planet. I don't know if my answer is complete enough for you, Pascal, or you want to dig in more?
It's gonna be all right for now.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much for that one. We have Stephen, who's next on the list.
Okay.
Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Quan. Thank you for another wonderful lecture. My question is kind of more slightly on the philosophical side. When you described the mandate of heaven, what came to mind was Cynthia's lectures on Leibniz and the underlying concept of natural law, and they almost seem roughly analogous to one another. Would you consider that to be true? And along that lines, when you were describing, I'll say, socialism with a Chinese interpretation, that to me sounds remarkably similar to the American founding fathers and the American system of economic approach, which of course links back to Leibniz through Vattel. So are you seeing sort of rough parallels between the Chinese contemporary thought and the founding American fathers' thought?
Well, Stephen, thank you for your question. It's more than a rapprochement, it's affiliation. okay? Because the three principles of the people by Sun Yat-sen were inspired by Abraham Lincoln and Henry Carey of the American School of Economy. And as I always promoted, Confucius and Plato are spiritual brothers. So it's more than a rapprochement, Stephen. It's simply in the same family of enlightened people.
And the slight variances are different cultural takes on the same essential truth, then, if you will.
Absolutely. That's why I am using the word. It's the same family of enlightened people.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, Madeline, it's all yours.
Hi. Okay.
Hi.
Oh, hold on. There you go. Okay. Thank you. That was a wonderful lecture.
Hi.
I have two questions, and I want to apologize in the beginning. The questions are based on more pragmatic understanding, and of course, because of my own ignorance. So no facetiousness intended here at all. Okay. So you mentioned this Chiang Kai-shek's shirt, I believe. You were using
Yes.
the buttons and the pockets, and so I was curious about this. Is this explanation that you used on the shirt, is this a common explanation that is used for the population to understand the breakdown of society in China, or is this your own explanation?
Okay. What I explained for the 5 items on the Mao Suit or the Zhongshan Fu is the standard explication by Sun Yat-sen himself, and that it has been accepted by the Communist Party of China.
Okay. Okay. So that, okay.
I can even send in our political group on Telegram a short video of 5 minutes explaining all these things.
Okay, that would be wonderful. Okay. And then my second question is, okay, again, coming from ignorance, how do you become a member of the Communist Party in China?
Okay, there are 2 ways. Okay, there are 2 general ways. If you want to be among the best of the best,
You're speaking
each year-
academically? You mean academically?
yes,
Okay.
yes. The first way, you have to be the first of your school, of your high school. Okay, at the end of each promotion, in Canada is secondaire 5. Okay, in the US is grade 11, I think so. At the end of each promotion, they would take the first of each high school to be a member of the Communist Party of China. That's the first way to be a member. But not everyone can be the first of his high school, of course. So a second way to enter the Communist Party of China is either when you are in college, that you don't have to be the first of your university, but you have to be one of the best of your university in your own department. Or you can be an outstanding sailor, you can be an outstanding seaman, you can be an outstanding airman. That's another way. You can be an outstanding worker too. You don't have to be an intellectual. You have to contribute to the society, but you don't have to be an intellectual. You can be an outstanding worker. You can be an outstanding peasant. You have to contribute to the society one way or another, and you have some exams and some interview to pass in order to be accepted. Okay, if I want to use Platonic terminology, you have to prove that you are at least a democrat, if not an aristocrat, in the Platonic sense, in order to be accepted in the Communist Party of China. and 95,148,000 members on 1,400 million people, it's about 6.5% of the population, okay? And in most population, elite, the aristocrats, in the true sense of aristocrats, has always been around 5%.
Okay, thank you very much. That helps.
Okay, we have Satomi on the list. Go for it, Satomi. You're on mute, by the way, Satomi.
Well, yeah, that's quite a different perspective, Quan, and we thank you for that. But I guess I'm a little skeptical because I just find it hard that maybe to really kind of accept that the corruption, you know, that we just like in America, we have such a great ideal, but the actual practical applications, we are not really, you know, we've had a sort of coup, I would say, and it's hard for me to really accept that China could just not have that kind of, you know, a deeper corruption and something that's may undermine this whole ideal. That's all, and I'm wondering what you how you feel about that.
Well, Satomi, I thank you very much for your question because it's a very important question. Of course, corruption exists in China. Obviously, I would be completely out of reality if I say that China doesn't have corruption. China has deep corruption. That's why when President Xi Jinping started his presidency in 2012, he started a campaign against corruption, and it gave some result because more than 1.5 million officials have been arrested and punished, and some of them very high ranked. And it's not only because they were his political opponents. I want to be very down to earth with you, Satomi. Of course, there is a political dimension in that struggle. Some of those high ranked people, who have been arrested were corrupted and were also his political opponents. So I don't deny the down-to-earth political dimensions, obviously. And I don't deny the reality of human corruptions. But let's not forget that in all government, you have the ideal and you have the reality. But if you don't have an ideal and if you don't have a pure center, if I may say so, how will you be capable to deal with the corruption? So you have to have a group of true aristocrats that will need to be uber enlightened and uber awakened to check the corruption at each moment. That's obvious. That's a process. And I think that your question is perfectly legitimate.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and I think, as you say, that vigilance is so important because look what happened to Canada, look what happened to America because
Yes.
of the lack of vigilance, I believe.
Oh, you know the sentence. Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Okay, you cannot escape that. That's a human reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, one other question, because you know, I really have a lot of respect for General Michael Flynn, and he still feels very, maybe more that it could be within America with Hollywood and so much of the industries being taken over by the communists or the Chinese. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, well, I know General Michael Flynn because I don't know him personally, but what I know him from the video that I saw with him interview, I consider him as one of the American democrats or aristocrats. But I still think that in the West, you still have honorable people like, for example, Professor Graham Allison, that I read some excerpts from his book, or General Michael Flynn. But the problem is that the plutocratic system in the US is so entrenched that I don't know, because of the limited knowledge that I have of the US deep state, that the only absurd command that I can say, and it's not really a command, is good luck to the American democrats and good luck to the American aristocrats.
Well, maybe, Matthew can answer that too.
I mean, I could chime in a word or two, but I mean, this is a longer discussion. What I could say though is that I've seen an immense buildup of narrative spinning to deflect attention away from the British intelligence causal hand behind global manipulation, and a redirection onto the Chinese Communist Party as the source and cause and driver of all evil of the international deep state, which ignores the reality, which is that, people like George Soros have said that the biggest threat to his open society just last year is Xi Jinping's China and Donald Trump's USA. Together, those two things have to be destroyed for his open society to work. And he succeeded. If you look at all of the role that he played with other figures that I won't go into right now, but we've written and published about that are all tied to British intelligence, which seek to destroy all nations, USA, China, Russia, all alike, for their own ends. So that's what I'm noticing. A lot of people like Michael Flynn, who are following the Epoch Times sort of tempered narrative, or you've got certain trial or hearings going on right now around the election fraud. A lot of the best people are really falling for this stuff. So that's why I'm really just happy that Quan was able to go through, and we have time for more questions, but I'm really happy that Quan was able to go through a lot of this to demystify what is China, what is its governing structures, what are its history and ethics. So yeah, there's a lot of misdirection though, I'd say, Satomi.
Yeah, that distraction. I believe that too. Yeah, thank you, Matthew.
Sure. So we had on the list, do you have time for a couple more questions, Quan?
Yeah, sure.
Wonderful. All right. So we got a couple more people. Namely, Stephen has a follow-up question, I believe, or a comment that I thought was useful that he wrote down. Stephen, why don't you share that?
Okay, I'll just read what I put in the chat, but it was regarding Magdalena's question on how you joined the Communist Party of China, the CPC, and your answer, Quan, on, it's basically the best of the best, whether it's high school or wherever. That reminded me of the Rhodes Scholarship Program. So you almost have an analogous thing, but for evil purposes within the Anglosphere, in that they identify the most promising future leaders and they pervert them in the West to serve this corrupted cause that many of them may not even understand the depth of corruption they become involved with. And I just thought it was an interesting juxtaposition to think about how the Chinese do it, and embracing on what, from my Western perspective, would seem to be into a Chinese interpretation of the American system of economics and natural law versus the mandate of heaven. So I thought it was a wonderful look at them as polar opposites, but both seeking to find the best of the best, but one for noble intent, whereas the other one for ignoble intent.
Exactly, because you can how can I say it? The talents are tools, but those tools can be used by virtuous people or by ignoble people.
Mm-hmm. And if I can just add one thought that maybe you want to comment on, when you look at much of what Matt and Cynthia have done over the years in terms of the universe that Carol Quigley revealed, if I can refer to it at that, and your comment that the Chinese strategy with regards to Afghanistan is cutting off the heroin rat line for the CIA and or British intelligence thing. Certainly the Chinese must have a very sophisticated understanding of the Western corruption, not just as an ideological competitor, but the real quantum mechanics of the problems of the West. You know, if they're taking a long-term approach to hopefully neutralizing Afghanistan as a heroin source, they must really understand the nature of the corruption that we're focusing on, or sorry, that we have to deal with.
Yes. Stephen, I don't know if you listen. Okay, I think there was a small problem of transmission for maybe 20 seconds, but I think you're right. The Chinese government understand perfectly, maybe not perfectly, but understand to a certain extent the oligarchical system and its shenanigans.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, so we have next up, Paula has been waiting to ask her question. Paula, go for it.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. I know my connection is not very good. And if I'm asking a question that if it has already been asked, I apologize. What would it take for the socialist China to achieve the state of communist China? And it has been asked already because I missed a few minutes. I apologize.
Okay. Well, the communist China is Datong, meaning the great harmony, meaning that it would be the ideal society, okay? It would be a society of brotherly love, meaning that the material development would be maximum, the education would be at the top, the communication between people perfect, the representation of the people in the government would be perfect, there would be no corruption or almost no corruption. So communism in the head, in the mind of the Chinese elite is the perfect society. So it's a far away goal.
And finally, we've got Pascal, who has been waiting for a follow-up question too. So Pascal.
Okay, yes, I have another one. You know, you listed, you used a book by Allison, I believe,
yeah,
where you addressed a portrait you took from his book, the comparison between Western and Chinese values,
yes,
or different items, the core values. You know, sometimes it's hard, you know, to have a discussion with people in the West because we have I think a very strict idea of what democracy is, and we put a lot of emphasis on that word, whereas it's not exactly what our systems are anyway in the West. You know, in the British Commonwealth countries, or even the United States, was not created to be a democracy. That's just rhetorical, you know, buzzwords that are thrown at people to make them feel good. But as I understand, China, you know, it's not just a top-down, you know, dictatorial system. There's really there's a way that the Chinese people can get, you know, their demands heard to the, you know, from the government. Do you know a bit about how it functions and how, you know, it's a different systems than we have here, but it's still something that can work?
exactly. Thank you for this question, Pascal. Because if I can express your question in another way, does a civil society exist in China? Okay, and my answer is yes, there is a civil society in China, and that civil society expresses itself in three ways. The first way is the official channel. Okay, in each village, county, or city, you can complain with the official at the office of the government, and it's a very serious thing, and it's part of the supervision system, the fifth button of the Mao jacket. Second, the internet system. You know that there are almost 900 million internet users in China, and Chinese people will express their complaints and their dissatisfactions to the government through different internet platforms. And you have official that will check those platforms and that will submit reports to the local and the central government about those dissatisfaction. And third, the central government from Beijing itself and the provincial governments will ask the people from time to time if they agree with such and such program offered by the government, and not forgetting the university and the college that are the cradle of the future elite, of course.
All right, thanks.
Very good. All right, Jerry was able to squeeze in a last question. So Jerry, go for it.
One last question. Oh, good. Oh, thank you very much, Quan, for the education. I just had a question because I know when in my work, when you look at the American Revolution that we call it now, at the time, the people in America didn't call it the American Revolution. They called it the War for Independence. Okay, yes, they wanted freedom. Yes, they wanted democracy, but it was a war for independence from the British Empire. And I was just wondering, in China, what we could call the Chinese Revolution with Sun Yat-sen, you know, what do they consider that a war for? You know, getting rid of the imperial system and what was established first with Sun Yat-sen and later with Mao and the Communist Party. But in China, what do they consider that change to be?
Okay.
I hope I'm clear.
Yeah, no, your question is crystal clear. For Sun Yat-sen, there were three goals. First, to get rid of the Chinese empire, to get rid of the imperial system, to establish the first Chinese republic, and to give lands to the Chinese peasants, okay? Because in the mind of the average Chinese person at the time, having land, meaning having the means to create your food, is the first step to personal freedom, okay? And most of the peasants under the imperial system were under the thumb of landlords, and those landlords were from the nobility or from the officials, okay, the official families, okay? The landlords are either from the imperial family and their connections, or from the people having succeeded at the imperial exams, becoming official of the Chinese empire, and their paramount characteristic is to be landlord. Okay, so to get rid of the imperial system, to establish a republic, and to give lands to the peasants so they can become free man. That's the three main goals for Sun Yat-sen.
Yeah, and for those who'd like to dig in a little bit more into Sun Yat-sen's mind, I shared in the chat area links to Sun Yat-sen's writings, but I'll put that also in the description box with all of the other resources that Quan will also suggest. But certainly the idea that we are all on a journey towards perfecting here on earth the laws of heaven is an ancient idea, which I think is just gorgeous. It's a really brilliant concept that is evident in all of the best of Asian culture. It's what animated the best of Western culture. It's really universal because we are ultimately human beings with certain universal characteristics, even though our cultures are different. We have different ways of looking at the world, but despite those subjective characteristics, there is something fundamentally primary and universal about all of us as having something of the divine, which Quan, I think you were able to do great justice to that. and really get across that nothing is a finished stage. There's no finished end crystallized product. When people talk about the USA or China in the current setting, it's either, you know, people tend to treat it as if it's a thing that you could talk about, but it's like, no, it's a process of becoming. Either is it becoming better or is it becoming worse? Is it enhancing or is it destroying those qualities, those divine qualities we all have within us? And I think what you began with is a great idea on how you've ended with as well, by citing the accomplishments and the objectives of the Chinese party, the Chinese Communist Party today, and how it's been able to accomplish many of the goals of Franklin Roosevelt, even when you look at his principles of his 4 freedoms, right? That a world order can only be justified if it is premised around the 4 freedoms that he enunciated first in 1941 and continuously reemphasized, and that formed actually the bedrock of the UN Charter, which today China and Russia have uniquely said has to be what we use as the basis of international law, not a rules-based New World Order. So that was really good. Pascal, you were doing some sort of a psychological warfare there on us. What was that? I don't understand what that is. Is that a globe?
Yeah, it's a globe that I got at the FDR.
Oh, those are the 4 freedoms.
It's are the 4 freedoms.
Okay, all right, cool.
That's why.
Good. So Quan, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We're going to have this class uploaded and available during the week. Next week, we will not be able to have a lecture. However, the following week, we will pick up where we left off, and Jeff Steinberg will be doing something on US-Russian history relations and the future, followed by something special by Jerry that will wrap up our package with some fun thoughts.
起来，不愿做奴隶的人们，把我们的血肉组成我们新的长城。中华民族到了最危险的时候，每个人被迫着发出最好的号声。起来，起来，起来！ 我们万众一心，冒着敌船的炮火前进，冒着敌船的炮火前进，前进，前进。Arise, you refuse to be bond slaves. Let's stand up and fight for liberty and true democracy. All our world is facing the chains of the tyrant. Everyone who works for freedom is now crying. Arise, arise, arise. All of us with one heart, with the torch of freedom, march on, with the torch of freedom, march on, march on, march on and on. 起来，不愿做奴隶的人们，把我们的血肉组成我们新的长城。中华民族到了最危险的时候，每个人被迫着发出最好的号声。起来，起来，起来！ 我们万众一心，冒着敌船的炮火前进，冒着敌船的炮火前进，前进，前进，进。